Hello, happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation with Dr. Allen Dieterich-Ward on his book, Cradle of Conservation. This is our third conversation in this series. It's been fun to dive into the book from so many different perspectives because, as we mentioned before, there's a lot of information in here in so many different ways to discuss it. So today, because we're in Earth Month, we're going to be looking at grassroots efforts and grassroots movements. So, Alan, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Marcy. I am, as always, really excited to be here and pleased. As you noted, having these conversations is really an opportunity to dig down in a little deeper into some of the issues that we talk about in Cradle of Conservation, but that, you just can't do justice to in the limited amount of time and space that I had in the book. We've talked now about women in Pennsylvania environmental history. We've talked about people of color, African Americans particularly, in Pennsylvania environmental history. And so today our theme is grassroots movements. And Pennsylvania has certainly been home to many, many grassroots movements from the conservation to the environmental justice era. So I'm super excited to get going. You want to pull up the slides and we'll head ourselves right in.
I will do that, and I'll remind our viewers that if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll make sure that we address them. And if you missed the first two episodes, you can find them on our YouTube channel and LinkedIn as well.
So here we are. We always start with our Joseph Rothrock and his Beagle screen. As we've talked about many times before, Pennsylvania has really has this fascinating relationship with working landscapes, right? And so we really structure the book and structure our conversation around the ways in which these particular working landscapes shape the policies, the people, and the places of Pennsylvania. So in talking about environmental grassroots movements more broadly, I wanted to start with what is this kind of major movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the progressive movement, right? And while we put Joseph Rothrock kind of on a pedestal or on a pulpit, as we might say here, it is really women who spearhead the conservation movement, who are the foot soldiers of the conservation movement, and really make sure that it happens. And they do this at a moment when women cannot vote, right? Women can't vote until the early 20th century. And so we really have several decades of women forming particularly social clubs, garden clubs, civic clubs, to begin to assert for themselves a place outside of the home, right? Where this notion of Victorian womanhood, where you can't leave the home, the woman's sphere is in the domestic sphere. But this notion that women are the moral conscience, the moral compass for society, gradually and slowly allows them to assert a role that extends beyond their own homes. And they do this really by articulating what our friend Myra Lloyd Dock, who we've talked about before on our conversations, called better housekeeping out of doors, right? That notion that a woman, a woman is for the house, and they're the moral compass, and they're in charge of raising children for the next generation. But in a republic, in a society, things that happen beyond her doors also affect the things that are going on in her home. And so that responsibility, that civic duty, right, to make sure that their role as a housekeeper extends to the broader community, you see women embracing this kind of throughout the state of Pennsylvania. The first garden club in the United States of America was established in Philadelphia. The civic club movement, which is a movement that both men and women are part of. You see civic clubs forming throughout the state. You see the first school for horticulture for women in Philadelphia, kind of growing out of that garden club movement. And what happens is this network of civic clubs, of garden clubs, of women's clubs becomes the correspondence, the conversation, the political network that allows for advocacy to happen across the state of Pennsylvania. We've talked about the formation of the Pennsylvania Forest Association or earlier in our conversations, which was formed originally, was called to order, motivated by Rothrock, sure, but called to order by two Philadelphia women, Maria Cox and Mary Lundy, who were deeply embedded in this civic and social club movement. And they then used those relationships, those connections that they had throughout the whole state to then push that agenda, to push that movement, both in terms of work on the local level and in terms of pressuring politicians, men, to get work done on the state level at the, in the General Assembly. It was really these networks of women that made that happen.
The grassroots.
The grassroots. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And to give you one example, kind of a local one, here I'm in Shippensburg, and in Carlisle, Carlisle has this really important women's movement that emerges. A woman named Gertrude Boswell Biddle, whose family is kind of very important in Carlisle. The Historical Society and Library are kind of named after members of her family. She corresponds with Myra Lloyd Dock, who's a close friend of hers. Dock is an officer of the Women's Club Federation of Pennsylvania, and you can see the ways in which that motivation, that conversation with the work that Doc's doing in Harrisburg, extends out into Carlisle. And I talk about this in the book. They focus on cleaning up the streets. They focus on. She talks about how William Penn. She says our forefathers had this vision of this green civic spaces that she chides the city fathers of Carlisle for abandoning, and it really argues for them to get back to that in clean streets and beautification. You see the shade tree commissions that are kind of omnipresent throughout Pennsylvania now. They formed during this time, and women staff those shade tree commissions. The parks movement for municipal parks, for children. Again, you can see this relationship to kind of women's gender roles, but that get parlayed into this broader civic duty. You see that specifically with Gertrude Boswell Biddle in Carlisle in a parks movement for establishing green, healthy places for their children to be able to recreate.
And I think that's a good reminder, because so often we assume that what we have just sometimes we think it just appeared. You don't realize all the effort that went into cleaning up the streets, reducing pollution, so you had potable water, putting in parks. But there was a lot of movement. There were a lot of people involved, and we are the recipients of their leadership.
That is so true, Marcy. The notion, it's not just words when we talk about the ways in which local communities, people didn't see eye to eye on big political, hard currency, gold standard versus silver standard, imperialist, non-imperial, like those debates and battles on the big national level, they were just as furious and polarizing in the 1890s as they are today. But local community people, women who could not vote, right, still managed to focus in on the things that they could do together, where they could find common ground, literally and figuratively common ground, and work to develop that on their local levels. And then again, they say all politics is local, right? By doing that, then on the local level, that forms this foundation for then again, the shade tree commissions are a good example of this. You have to have state enabling legislation for this. I mean, the state creates the shade tree commissions, and of course, where are the seedlings going to come to for those shade trees in communities? Well, they're going to come from places like the nursery at Mont Alto, where Ralph Brock, is the superintendent, right? And so that those local movements on the grassroots level, they magnify themselves to move things on the state level, and we're the beneficiaries of those today. Okay. So that's just my first one. That's just my first one. Okay, you ready for the second one? Okay.
I'm ready.
So, Marcy, you and I are just a hair young for this, but some of our listeners out there who were of the baby boom generation, right? They remember that big kind of post-war boom in the 1950s and 1960s. More and more people coming off of farms, We're coming out of the cities, moving to the suburbs. Of course, highways and industrialization are kind of the law of the land. And you actually have this counter movement. You've probably read Auto Leopold. Obviously, you've read Rachel Carson. And there is this kind of backlash among some people to what they feel is getting too far away from nature, getting too far away from agriculture and from farming. And we kind of call this the back to the land movement, right? And it takes a lot of different forms. There are kind of the hippie communes, right, that we kind of think about, free love and and that sort of thing. And of course, other folks are focusing more broadly on environmental cleanup. But among all of that, there is this back to the land movement of more, buttoned up, kind of staid people. Among them, the Rodale Institute, right? And we forget that so much of what we think of today as organic and sustainable, this notion that there is this alternative to heavily using pesticides, to heavily using chemicals, that movement is just as scientific, right, as the big companies. If you're going to grow fruits and vegetables, if you're going to grow food and you want to have a more sustainable method of producing it, one that is more locally oriented, in which you're using less fossil fuels, using less treatments from the outside, that doesn't just happen. You have to have a very tailored approach, a very scientific approach to doing that. And that motivation, that framework, really begins here in Pennsylvania, first in Emmaus, and then at the Rodale Institute's model farm just outside of Kutztown, which exists today. Have you ever been to that model farm? That's on my bucket list of things to do, Marcy.
It's on my bucket list as well. I mean, I've always been a fan of Rodale, and I've had a lot of their books, from a gardening perspective, but I've not been to the farm.
Well, you know what? You and I'll have to plan a trip up there, right? Maybe
Let's do that. Road trip.
I have good friends. Andy Arnold at Kutztown. If you're listening to this right now, you invite me and Marcy up to do a book talk at Kutztown, and we're gonna fulfill our dream of stopping by the Rodale Institute. And of course, this notion of less chemical use, more sustainable features. This has become quite a movement that has expanded really worldwide, right? And I think we have the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, PASA, right? Which has a real statewide presence. Just down here, we have I think the CSAs, the Community Supported Agriculture model, that many of us rely on for local fruits and vegetables throughout the year. Even my favorite, kind of drink local, which is my motto, right? Where we're seeing an increased interest in growing hops locally, and growing the wheat and barley and grapes for wine, and of course down here in South Central Pennsylvania, our most important alcoholic beverage, and that is cider from our local apples. But all of that kind of vision of turning away from what many folks saw as an increasing reliance on big business, big factories, heavy pollution, getting too far away from the people and the places that produce our food. That really is the cradle of that is here in Pennsylvania.
Nice. Yeah, I was thinking about my CSA when you were talking, because my share starts tomorrow. So I'm like pretty excited.
You'll be getting that garlic. You'll be harvesting garlic before too long, I'm thinking, right?
I'm sure there'll be some nice greens in there.
This is the perfect time of year for horseradish, of course, as well. And I just saw my rhubarb is starting to poke up through the ground too. So we'll be getting some nice. Is it?
Mine's about. Yes.
Great.
I'm excited. I love rhubarb.
Tulips and rhubarb. That's how I tell when spring is coming. So
yes, good harbingers.
That's right. Okay. So now let me turn to our third grassroots, and this is one that is really, really dear to me. Now, we've talked in our previous discussions about these kind of three broad stages that we can think of kind of Pennsylvania's environmental culture. right? Kind of the way in which, broadly speaking, the people, the places, the policies of Pennsylvania sort of interact with each other kind of in a big way. The conservationist era, the environmentalist era that we see here as being Rodale, and then what we're thinking of is this environmental justice era. This notion of, in an era of deindustrialization and post-industrialization, where some of the earlier relationships with the land that we saw that really propelled Pennsylvania to fame, what do we do with those landscapes that are no longer serving their original function? You know, these brown fields, these industrial sites, right? And one of the movements that emerges out of deindustrialization is the rail trail movement, the rails to trails movement, right? What do you do with, and it connects to everything, literally and figuratively. What do you do with these thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of what are brown fields, oftentimes, you know, relatively polluted landscapes? I mean, from cinder, from coal, from ash, right? From all of those things. What do you do with them? Pennsylvania, of course, being the state with the most miles of railroad, right? It only makes sense that Pennsylvania would be the state with the most miles of rails to trails that develop out of that, and some of the earliest rails to trails that happen. Now, the earliest kind of what everybody kind of thinks of as the earliest rail trail actually happens out in the Midwest, but we barely count them, right? So it's just a one-off, right? It's really here in Pennsylvania that we care about, and we really see the rail to trail movement begin in Pennsylvania in the early 1990s, right? And that's kind of this moment where we have this concern that all of these connecting pieces that really went in through the heart of communities. I mean, communities reoriented themselves around the railroads, right? And sort of the rise of automobile and the highway sort of kind of messed with that alignment. Here's an opportunity to kind of reconnect communities, the downtown parts of communities, through rails to trails. And you can trace the development of that in a couple of ways. One is looking at what becomes the Great Allegheny Passage from Pittsburgh down to Cumberland, Maryland. And we see kind of the first elements of that Great Allegheny Passage coming out of Ohiopyle State Park kind of in the mid 1980s, right? And what we see by the early 1990s is this concern that if we just leave this up to every individual community, there are plenty of communities interested in doing rails to trails, but it takes a lot of effort, right? And oftentimes these rail trails, these railroad lines are crossing jurisdictions, crossing municipal lines. How to go about creating out of this grassroots kind of focus on rail to trail some kind of state framework for making it work. And we see that happen in the early 1990s, and it comes out of Pine Creek Gorge, right? So Pennsylvania's a Grand Canyon, they call it. And in the early 1990s, a state legislator named Tom Murphy, who goes on to become Pittsburgh mayor and really launch the Rails to Trails movement in Pittsburgh, he becomes the sponsor of a bill that functionally allows the state, through the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, to begin funding rails to trails, both on its own property, like we saw down at Ohiopyle State Park, but also seeing it as a prerogative of the state to help these local groups develop it more broadly. And we see a grants program that emerges in a state of enabling legislation that allows for DCNR, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, to partner with local groups, right? And just about that time, just connecting it to locally, the Rail Trail Council that I'm a member of, the Cumberland Valley Rail Trail Council, like a lot of others, kind of comes out of this kind of mid-1990s moment where you have this alignment of local interest and state enabling legislation to provide funding, where we see public-private partnerships that allow for rails to trails to happen. They're kind of everywhere now, and everyone loves them. Like you often hear people, oh, why are we spending money on this or that? And then when the trail gets built, they're the first ones who are out there. They love them. Everyone loves rails to trails, and they perform such an important civic function. We saw this during COVID, right? Of being this public space kind of right in the middle of communities. These are not wild land trails, which of course serve their own purpose, but these are the things that are very accessible, that connect communities, that bring folks together in the heart of our cities.
Yeah, we recently it was at a presentation with Dr. Silas Chamberlain, and they
Yes.
were monitoring the rail use there on the York Heritage Rail Trail, and a large percentage of the users were local people,
Yes.
and then
Yep.
the regional, and then it was bringing people in, and communities
Nationally
along
and
were
internationally.
establishing rail towns. I'm
Hmm.
sorry.
Nationally and internationally. That's right. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of it's local, but people like me and others, they want they want to get an authentic experience of a community, and there's no better place to do that than from the rails to trails.
Yes. I plan trips around rail trails. Pam and I did the Pine Creek Rail Trail a number of years ago. Rode
My
it in
bucket
its
list. This fall, I'm
entirety.
finally going to do it this fall, Marcy.
Oh, do it. It's so wonderful.
So
It's
I'm
just
so looking
beautiful.
forward to it. Hmm.
Yeah, and now I believe you can go all the way into Wellsboro. We
Hmm.
actually rode
Yep.
to
Yep.
Hills Creek and then over to Mount Pisgah State Park.
Oh my
So
heavens. That is on my that could getting to Redale and getting up to Pine Creek Gorge. Those are my two. So tell me, Marcy, what's your give me two answers here. What's your favorite sort of everyday love to use rail trail, and then what's been your favorite rail trail experience?
oh, that's a tough one. I've done Pittsburgh to DC
Hmm.
twice
Hmm.
with Pam, who's in the
That's
back
the
rail
Allegheny
here.
Passage down to the
The Great
CNO
Allegheny
National Historical
Passage,
Park.
yeah, and then Pam and I did a Ohio Pile to Pittsburgh ride one day. We did it in a day
That's
with
it
chocolate
can be
milk.
done. It can be done.
It can be done. Um, so probably, what do it's on a rail trail. It was a canal towpath trail. I really like the
Hmm.
Western Lancaster County Trail.
We'll count it. We'll count it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Western Lancaster County,
Hmm.
Bainbridge to Columbia is one that I really enjoy, and I think
Hmm.
it's a little bit more twisty and turny
Yep. Yep.
than a regular rail trail. Great Allegheny Passage, I love.
Of course. Right.
Fine,
Yeah.
but the Katy Trail is on my bucket list, and
Yeah.
in other states. So there are trails that are on my bucket list.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
Well,
And for
that's
my
fantastic.
when a decade ago, one of the trails I did for my 50th birthday was I wanted to do the Cumberland Valley one, and I did
Mhm.
that. I rode from Newville down to Shippensburg.
That's right.
So,
That's great. And we're kind of building all the time, right? Adding to it and adding
yeah.
to it. So we try.
Yeah. And I think you made a good point of, these were areas that were there in brownfields. We have other
Yes.
brownfields that we're developing into other things, but I don't think people think of them as brownfields. And
They don't.
once
Yeah.
they're cleaned up and
Yeah.
they're attracting people, they're conveyances for people to get movement to, they allow a lot of different abilities
That's
because
right.
they're oftentimes, don't have a lot of grade.
Yep. They don't have
They're
great
they're
grade because
smooth.
what was good for the railroad is good for folks with limited mobility. 100%.
Yes, strollers, so lots of use. I use the Conewago Trail a lot
Yeah.
because I have a friend it's our halfway point where we
Uh-huh.
meet and we walk.
Yeah. Have you done the North Central Trail from York down to Gunpowder Falls?
Yes,
Yeah. So I love that. That's
that
such
one's
a
very nice too.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's it for me for today, Marcy. We've gone now from the role of women in grassroots during the progressive era, all the way up through us taking advantage of these rails to trails today. I mean, again, and you made this point earlier, I think this underscores the notion that these things don't just happen, right? They take everyday people finding a passion and then coming together as a group to get things done. That's what our ancestors did, and that's what we have to do today if we're going to give the same opportunities to our children and grandchildren.
Absolutely. And we got two comments. So
Let's hear it.
somebody's recommended the Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes someday.
Ooh, I have never been to. I assume it's in Idaho. Everything I've heard about Idaho is lovely. I can't wait to get out there.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. And then we had a question: what effect did grassroots movements have on the rise of the environmental justice movement in Pennsylvania?
That's an absolutely great question. I mean, it's if you look in Chester, and we've talked about this before a bit, right? I mean, environmental justice movement, kind of coming out out of Chester, is all about grassroots movement. I mean, like it's a local group that is fighting for their own local environmental quality, right? So completely and totally, and I think. You can look at a whole range of different issues that we're dealing with today around fracking, right? Around access to or wildlife protection. I mean, I think of the Audubon Society, right? Really, the notion of the outdoors and the environment being for everyone, right? Not just for a particular group, not just for a particular subset. And of course, that goes back to our constitutional rights as Pennsylvania citizens. There is no delineation by race, class, or gender as to who has a right under the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 1, Section 27, to a clean and healthy environment and all of the benefits of the natural world. And so I think one of the kind of key movements in that direction is not just to kind of make environmental change, but rather also to make changes in how people feel, the comfort level that people have, the access level that people have to the environmental amenities that we have. And that, of course, is inherently about environmental justice.
Good. Yeah, well, thank you, Alan. I think it's a good reminder that the think globally, act locally, and what you can do as an individual, and that you can lend your voice in so many different ways to causes that are important to you.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
And find a group of people that enjoy the same thing you do, and get something going. That's my advice. That's what we do here in Shippensburg. I know that that's how Marcy and her team work at the Parks and Forest Foundation. And if put your shoulder to the plow, and we can get things done.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I will say I did get to do a bucket list trail, the High Line, last summer.
Okay, let's hear about it.
Oh, no, that was in New York.
It
was just sorry?
Was it the new Main Line Trail in New York, or what was it? What was the trail?
Is it called the High Line?
Yay, I've heard all about that.
Yeah. That was very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think that just underscores the fact that Rails to Trails, and again, my picture suggested this, it goes through the middle of nowhere. It goes right to the heart of cities. It connects all of our different working landscapes together. It allows people to access and engage with all of our different types of working landscapes.
Yes. So, well, thank you, Alan. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all in May. Where is the year going?
Have we decided on our theme for next month yet?
I have to go back and look. I don't remember. I think we may have.
Huh?
But we're flexible, right?
That's right. And I should say, if anyone has ideas, let us know. Lord knows, getting me to talk ain't the problem. So you come up with So, write in, send us emails, put your thoughts in the comments, reach out, and you may just be the one who picks the theme for one of our future shows.
Absolutely. And I did put in the comments, if you haven't read Alan's book, it is worth reading, and you can get it at the paparksandforest.org website. Just click on the store. So, thank you, and enjoy the day. And happy Earth Month.
Thanks. Happy Earth Month to you too.
Yeah, and also we're celebrating the Joseph Trimble Rothrock Memorial Conservation Week starts this weekend. So enjoy the outdoors.
Awesome.
Bye.